Hello everyone, this is Dr. Mikola Rashek of Genomics once again making another video update on mRNA vaccines, and today's episode is particularly special because the topic of this video has been selected by you, the audience. So first of all, thank you to all of you who have participated in voting and submitted your vote on our online survey. More than 800 of you selected which topic you want, and there was definitely a clear winner, and that is basically all of you wanted predominantly to see information on the recently published data from FDA that was obtained through the Freedom of Information Act on what kind of information Pfizer submitted to FDA in order to obtain the emergency use approval for their vaccines. Now, this data is supposed to be released apparently over many years to come, and this is the very first snippet that was granted to us. So let's take a look at what this information shows. So here's this document and the link. Hopefully I have the right document. I've seen it presented in one other video. Nevertheless, let's see what this document has to offer. So let's go to the very start of results being reported. Here's the information. And first of all, you can see that the total number of doses of the Pfizer vaccines distributed around the world is blocked out. So we don't know what that number is, which technically prevents us from being able to actually make any estimates of the frequency of any reported side effects in this document. However, there's a way to potentially go around, and I'll show you right away. Another information here is that this is only data that has been compiled in the first 3 months post-vaccination, so from the start of December till end of February, so only first 3 months. So we also don't know how frequently any of these events were reported, how soon post-vaccination, but that's okay. We also know that 42,000 case reports were issued, meaning 42,000 individuals have been affected by this point with some form of event. However, keep in mind this would have been literally out of many and many millions of people being vaccinated at this point. And here's the very useful information. Here it shows you how many people have been affected in the United States. And the reason why this information is useful is because we can use this as a surrogate to estimate the frequency of these events, because we could find out how many American people have been vaccinated by that point. And I'll show you that data as well. Now we'll see some demographics of this data. And the first thing, so here's 42,000 people. The very first thing that jumps out at me is the ratio between women and men that are being affected. And you can see that females are disproportionately impacted compared to males. They're about 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 times as many women are being affected than men. And clearly that does not represent the typical demographics, because typically there's 50-50% of men and women. So without any information whatsoever, without any data of any kind, the very first thought I would be thinking is whether this should be studied in further detail to determine whether the dosing, perhaps vaccine dose, should be potentially altered for women in order to alleviate some of these issues that are being observed for women. Here is the age distribution of what was observed. But of all the different case outcomes, this is probably the most interesting data being presented. And the reason why is because I have not seen this type of data being presented before. Typically, it's very difficult to obtain. And this is the first time I see this type of information being reported. Out of 42,000 people, that's not a trivial number. That makes up almost 3% of all of the different reported events. However, once again, if you were to consider that this is information based out of millions and millions of people being vaccinated around the world by that point, all of the events that we're going to be discussing basically would turn out to be extremely rare, and we'll see that right away. Now, those are the number of people. However, remember, each person could report more than one type of events. So the total number of events is well over 100,000. We don't know what the total number of events is because this document does not provide this information. But if we were to add them up, they would exceed more than 100,000 events being recorded. Now, here is a tabular summary of which organ systems or body parts are being affected. So one of the areas that actually made a bit of a splash on social media is this one, nervous system disorders. And the reason why is because it seems so high. However, as you can see right away, majority of this are made up by simple headache. So this might sound as really dramatic, but in reality is the vast majority of recorded events are mild. And we get to this information right here. And the way we're supposed to read this information is that it's divided by percentages of the total number of people who report a given event, as long as that event is being reported more than 2% of this population, then we have all of these events are being listed below. So as an example, right here, swollen lymph nodes were observed in approximately 5% of the population that have reported some form of events. Now this one might be more serious. This is an unusual fast heartbeat, approximately 3%. Why this could be serious? Because sometimes this can be dangerous. Luckily, this can typically should resolve itself, but it can be dangerous. Now, one of the more common events reported is nausea. Right here, another one, most common one is fever. So the point here is that the vast majority of these events are the ones that are typically associated with vaccinations. Nothing unusual here, really. And the vast majority of these are mild. So the reason why it's unusual is because keep in mind that, of course, post-vaccination, it's not unusual to experience illness-like symptoms because, after all, vaccination is mimicking an infection to stimulate your immune system. So while some of these could be more serious, look at the nervous system disorders right here, the ones that made quite a bit of news. Headache is the most commonly reported event. That makes up the bulk of nervous system disorders. 24% of all of these people reported headache. Dizziness is another super common event right below. This one might be more serious. This is unusual sensation in the limbs. The reason why is because this can sometimes take a long time to resolve. But overall, if we count all of the events that were reported at least 2% of the time in the total number of population with events, you can see 93,000 events. There will be many, many more below that are lower than 2% recorded. They're not in this table, but the most common ones, nothing stands out. The one that stands out specifically to me, though, that I found interesting is this one right here. And the reason why I found this interesting, because COVID-19 is reported here as a form of a side effect. In essence, we're capturing information on vaccine breakthrough. So while breakthrough has been documented as nearly 5% amongst the population that does report any kind of event, remember, this is out of everyone who's been vaccinated around the world. So this number from all of the millions of people being vaccinated around the world is insanely small. So small that perhaps almost unrealistically small in terms of breakthrough cases. And this is why I found this interesting, is because perhaps if we were to look at what the actual recorded breakthrough cases were in the first 3 months as collected through different health authorities databases around the world, if we're able to look at that information and compare to this one, it could give us an estimate of how much of these events are potentially underreported in general. Now we're going to look at safety concerns. The first one is anaphylaxis. So this is when you have a severe allergic reaction to vaccine. And the take-home message here is that these are, again, extremely rare. Only 1,000 cases reported all over the world. In the United States, only 184 cases reported. Now, by this point, as I'll show you right away, I estimate that at least 20 million Americans would have been vaccinated. That makes this event very, very rare. More rare than 1 in 100,000 people might experience anaphylactic reaction, so exceedingly rare. Now this next one is somewhat interesting because it tracks the associated enhanced disease post-vaccination. So this is when vaccines, through potentially some of the antibodies that they might produce, how such antibodies, if they're not made correctly, might promote the disease. And typically, my understanding is that this type of studies are supposed to be done prior to vaccine being rolled out. In this case, I believe it was not done because the vaccine was approved for emergency use. However, since then, the vaccine has actually been approved by FDA, and now my understanding is that these studies are being conducted in order to satisfy that criteria. And as you can see in this report, when they started looking at this, once again, this is a very rare event in the United States. They estimate that maybe approximately 25 cases might have exhibited this unusual event. So insanely rare at this stage. So in those first 3 months, there is just simply not enough data to draw meaningful conclusions. Now we're going into pregnancy, and unfortunately, I find this information somewhat useless. Total number of cases reported are 413, 274 related to pregnancy issues, and 133 related to breastfeeding. And the reason why this information is useless is because we don't know what the denominator is. We just don't know out of how many pregnant women were these reported, and therefore we cannot make any meaningful estimates how common or how rare these events are. However, keep in mind that I previously made video number 6 where I discussed this information as it compares what is being observed in pregnant women who were vaccinated versus unvaccinated, as well as in the latest video that I uploaded, which looks at the data coming from the UK. So check out those videos if you want to see more of that information. This report definitely does not offer us anything of use because we cannot make any meaningful estimates at all, because we just don't know how many pregnant women were involved. And then we're going to go into adverse events of special interest. So these are the ones that could be potentially more serious. So we've already discussed anaphylactic reactions. Let's take a look at cardiovascular issues as an example. Once again, total number of cases around the world is only 1,400 cases reported, once again, out of millions of people being vaccinated. So very rare. In the United States, only 233 cases. Once more, this would be something in the order of 1 in 100,000 people perhaps might experience cardiovascular related event. And the summary of this, as is the summary for all other events being studied, it's always the same. Conclusion is always the same. This review does not raise new safety issues, meaning nothing to worry about, at least not from this very preliminary original data. And if we're to go to this table for any other events of special interest being studied, the conclusion is always the same. Not enough data to be able to raise any alarms. You can look at what these events that are being reported in detail, but any event that is being reported would just be exceedingly rare event in general. So let's take a look at as an example, musculature. And the reason why is because in the US, this is one of the more commonly reported adverse events, with more than 1,000 people being affected. And even that, if you divide that over more than 20 million people potentially being vaccinated, this is still a very rare event, almost approaching something more like 1 in 25,000 cases. So very, very rare. So the take-home message for this entire report over and over is that all of these events, if they're serious, they're more serious, they're just exceedingly rare. Those that are reported even more often, still super rare, and the vast majority of these are mild. So let's take a look at now how I estimated what are the typical events estimates in the United States. And the reason why is because I was able to go to this page. This is run by CDC, where you can download the data on how many people are being vaccinated in the United States. So let's take a look at this information really quick. And actually, let's take a look right here. Now recall that the data was only presented till the end of February, which is right here. So this is the CDC data that you can download. So this marks the end of February. Let's take a look how many people were vaccinated with Pfizer vaccine. And here we get to the column administered Pfizer doses. Almost 40 million doses have been already administered by that point amongst American people. So that would include both people who both had 2 doses versus 1 dose. And so let's see if we can estimate number of people. So if we continue looking further down, here is the column that tells you how many people completed the series, meaning how many people were vaccinated with 2 doses. And by the end of February, you see a big fat 0. However, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days later, they finally started reporting the data, and almost 60 million people are being reported as fully vaccinated literally just 5 days later. If you look at the trend of how fast people are being vaccinated, approximately a million people were vaccinated in every 2 to 3 days. So if we go back 5 days earlier, we could estimate that maybe approximately 14 million Americans would have been fully vaccinated by a Pfizer vaccine. So 14 million times 2, that's 28 million doses. If you look at this information right here, 28 million doses used up for full vaccination. That leaves us approximately 10 million people who would have received 1 dose. So 10 million people with 1 dose plus 14 million people with 2 doses. This is how we derive with an estimate that approximately 24 million Americans would have been vaccinated at this point out of approximately 40 million doses distributed. So that is how we can start making estimates, because recall there was 13,000, almost 14,000 people being affected in the United States at that point. So we can estimate that almost 1 in 3,000 doses administered resulted in some sort of an event that it was being recorded. Or if we look at the number of people, almost 1 in 2,000 people would experience some sort of an event. Luckily, the vast majority of these are mild, and the serious ones are extremely rare. So here's anaphylaxis example, 184 divided by 24 million. We're looking at more than 1 in 100,000 people. That's how rare this event occurs, and even one of the more commonly reported affecting musculature, that's still almost 1 in 24,000 people that might experience this event. So this is basically how we can estimate, based on that very preliminary data from the first 3 months, how rare these events are. And out of curiosity, I was wondering, that was the first 3 months, how does it compare to potentially what we might see otherwise right now? So I wanted to show you some of the data that I looked at from Canada. And here's the website. And the reason why I wanted to show you this one is because, first of all, it's from Ontario, which is the largest province in Canada, and also to summarize the data for entire last year. So this report was recently released, and also Public Health Ontario does fantastic job making these reports. I really enjoyed checking their reports. Some of the best in the world. I really enjoy their stuff. So we scroll just a few pages down. Here's the table we want to focus on, and here it is. Out of the Pfizer vaccines, approximately 60 events are being recorded per 100,000 doses. This is somewhat ambiguous information because it's in terms of number of doses and not in terms of number of people, because that could include people with 1 dose or 2 doses or 3 doses by now, right? But nevertheless, 58 divided by 100,000, you're getting approximately 1 in 1,500 events per number of doses being administered. So similar to what we have seen in the United States. So once again, it seems that side effects, at least based on the currently available data from vaccines, are extremely rare, and those that do appear, most of them are mild and typical side effects that are expected from post-vaccinations. So we're going to end here at this moment. The only other information I would want to share with you is the fact that we're going to have another event coming up, COVID-19 Q&A number 3. The first 2 events were really fun and great success. So please check it out. The link to the event is in the description below. Also, if you want to get a free ticket, then the first 10 people who subscribe to our newsletter will send you a free ticket. So once again, the link to the newsletter subscription is in the description below. Check it out. If you like this video, Give us a like, subscribe to the channel, share the video, all that good stuff. You know how it works. And in the meantime, we're looking forward to seeing you at another installment of these. Bye, everyone.